Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilter 7 in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 135, is answering viewers' questions. But before we get to that, I want to share with you my turkey. You recall last week I said I wasn't looking forward to making it, but I wanted the end result. And this was the pattern, and I said it's got a zillion pieces. I did make the size 200% because I was making a door banner, and here it is. Linda helped pick out the fabrics. Look at how great these stripes worked out. She's always good for a black background. You know, we always think white and cream on cream, but she goes for the black, and it was a lot easier than I thought. I think I really have the foundation paper piecing down now, that I just kind of did these all assembly line fashion because they were all the kind of, even though they were different size pieces, they were all the same order pieces. And it just went together like a breeze. And I don't know if you remember doing the Bonnie Hunter Beginners and Enders project. This is her 2024 Beginners and Enders Challenge, and she called it County Clare. And of course, I don't use Beginners and Enders, and I don't like doing pieces for another quilt in between the pieces of the quilt I'm working on. So I showed you in my episode, and I can't remember right now what one it is, but we'll put it on the screen. To do it all strip pieced, because all these pieces are 2.5 inch and 1.5 inch. I reversed her blues and greens. I made the green the big pieces, and hers the blues are the big pieces. But now all I have to do is get it quilted and bound. That's it. So really happy with that. So now let's get to the viewers' questions. One viewer wrote that she got donations of scraps, and some were flannel and some were regular quilting cotton. Would I mix them? I generally don't like using flannel in quilts to start with, just because they don't hold up as well as the regular quilting cotton. But especially as a donation, you don't know where it came from. You don't know the quality of the fabric as well. And the one thing she pointed out, she didn't know if it was washed or not. Certainly, if you are going to mix, you want to be sure that they're all washed, because the flannel will shrink differently than the quilting cotton. So generally, when we get flannel scraps in donation bags, they go to the dog bed stuffing bag, because we just can't trust how good the fabric is. Let's see, the next one is, would I recommend the use of a walking foot to put on borders if you don't have a dual feed? And I don't think you necessarily need to always use a walking foot. If you put the border on the bottom and the quilt top on the top, and maybe you want to put in a few pins if you're struggling a little bit, certainly a walking foot is never going to hurt you. But I don't think you need it unless you're getting wavy borders. If you're getting wavy borders, that would be a solution that I would try. I would definitely then use the walking foot. The next question was, what width of binding do I cut? And the question was in regards to the Christmas tree skirts. But in general, my width of binding, if I'm going to hand stitch it to the back, I cut mine 2 inches, because that gives a nice tiny little even front and back binding. If I'm machine finishing, I cut 2 1/4, because I need that little bit extra to catch the other side, make sure I get it all sewn down. Now, I will, with that being said, I will say, I'd say at least 90% of my customers cut theirs 2 1/2. And the reason I don't like that is one side when you sew the 1/4 inch, whether it's to the front or the back, whichever side then you flip it over to is much larger than the side that you sewed the 1/4 inch to, and I like to have them more even. The next question is, do I cut the dog ears off on my diamond candle mats? And the answer is yes, but I don't do it until I've sewn them. I like those points. I know a lot of rulers have you trim off the points, and sometimes that works out great. But I like the points so that I can match them and make sure that my pieces are in the right place. But if you left them all on, especially in those 6-pointed stars, that center is going to have a good, big fat lump on it. And if you try to put a candle or a vase or something on top of it, it's going to be wibbly wobbly. So I actually, after I sew the 2 halves, I get a scissors in that center spot and I trim out the excess bits and pieces from the tips of the diamonds. Then I sew the 2 halves together and I can get a nice flat center. And that's important for a candle mat. The next question is, do I use steam? I think I've answered this before, but I will again. I do not use steam on pieces that have a bias edge. If it has a bias edge exposed, I do not want to stretch it. So in that case, I'm very careful to just put the iron down and pick it up. If I have a whole block all put together, I will use steam, and I will also be happy to push and press out like borders, make sure they're nice and flat. So I use steam in some cases, don't use steam in other cases, but the deciding factor for me is there a bias edge that I am open to stretching? Because I sure don't want to do that. The next question is, what was the name of the pattern for the layer cake that I showed you the 2 quilts from last week? And that is Celebrate the Day, and it's from McCall's Quick Quilts, February-March 2010. And the reason that I would not use a layer cake to make that pattern again is because a whole 4-inch square was not used. So to me, out of a 10-inch square, a 4-inch square not being used, I think that's somewhere around 20% of the layer cake isn't used. That's too much waste for me. I did like the pattern. I would make it again, but I would use yardage or stash rather than a 10-inch square pack. All right, this was a really interesting question for me to ponder. And it was, what are my thoughts on the saying, finished is better than perfect? And I have to say, I'm not a real fan of doing things sloppy just to get it finished. As you know, I rip and resew a lot, and it doesn't bother me. I would rather do that than leave something away I didn't want it. And so to me, I would rather have one thing finished well than 2 things finished, but there were parts of it that I'm just not happy with. And one commenter, I think, said it absolutely perfectly. Catherine F. said, I think she said it best, I'd rather have it be my best effort rather than accept something inferior just to be done. I couldn't agree more, Catherine. One other thing before I get to the last part about patterns. One commenter said, you talk about serging batting, and I'd like to see you do that. Well, you don't really need to see me do it because it's just feeding the fabric through like you would doing any serging. The key is having your serger set up set up correctly, I should say. So I use for serging batting a 2-thread flat lock, and I have the stitch length set at 4, and the normal is 2.5, so much longer. And I have the differential feed set at 2, where 1 is normal. And I just feed it through, and I know you can't see the stitches because I keep white thread in the serger that I use to serge batting, but you just feed it through, and this has been fed through, and then you just tug it. And I'm going to bring it up as close as I can to the camera. I don't know if you'll be able to see the stitches at all, but I'm trying to pull it apart so you can see a little bit there. But it is then entirely flat. If you put your fingers on this, you would see that it's totally flat. And that's all you do, is you just tug it. And even if I have, you know, a 60, 70-inch long piece, I just go through tug, 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 and it works fine. Once that thing is quilted, no one is ever going to know. It's a lot faster than zigzagging. Heat press tape works, but this is just super fast for me. So I like this method for using up batting scraps. Again, the caveat is use the same batting. Don't mix cotton with poly. Just if you've got a blend, use the blend, etc. Now I had a couple pattern questions, and the first one said she wanted to make a dinosaur quilt. Did I have any suggestions to make a dinosaur quilt? And of course, to me, the first question is, are you looking to make something with dinosaur fabric, or do you want to make a dinosaur? As if you want to make a dinosaur, easy, probably not, but excellent patterns. There's a lunchbox quilts, has a pattern called Quiltosaurus, and this is done in the embroidery machine. So this would be some work, but it certainly would get you a fabulous looking quilt. Back to my old favorite, Elizabeth Hartman. She has a dinosaur quilt. I've been wanting to make this one forever, and I have not. It's not hard. As with everything Elizabeth Hartman, you need to stay organized. Label your pieces so you don't get them mixed up, but it would make a fantastic quilt. This viewer said something easy. So the easiest thing to do, and if I could find my card here, yeah, is use dinosaur fabric. Find some dinosaur fabric somewhere, and then go back to the episode 132 just a couple weeks ago that we did that said, what do you do with big prints you don't want to cut up? There's the BQ patterns, there's the Sweet and Simple with a lime twist, and there's the town square. All those are good quilt patterns that you could do super fast, a whole lot faster than the lunchbox quilts and the Elizabeth Hartman that I just showed you. The last thing was the woman commented, and she didn't really ask, but I thought I'd make a comment about it anyway. It was in the when you purchase without a purpose, and she said she just loved the fresh as a daisy Moda fabric, and so she bought a half yard of every single fabric that she could find. So she's got 7 half yards sitting there with not a quilt plan in sight. And I just want to make a comment on using those. We have made a quilt from this book before, and I've showed it. What was it called? 40 carats? Something carats. Yeah, 48 carats. We made this quilt with just a few little modifications. We used a few less fat quarters than they called for, but nothing major. There wasn't a ton of waste other than if you had used as many fat quarters as they told you to use. But when you look for a pattern, and I say this all the time, when you look for a pattern, you want to look for one with minimal waste and minimal additional fabrics needed. So as I paged through this book, I came through to the Roman candle. And I thought, oh, I like the looks of that quilt. And then I read the fabric requirements. 1 fat quarter each of 4 blues. So now you're using 1 yard of that stash of fat quarters that you wanted to use. 2 yards of cream and 3 1/4 yards of red. And that doesn't include the backing. So you're using a yard of what you wanted to use, but yet you need 5 1/4 yards of additional stuff. That is not a good pattern to try to use up your stash. Unless you have, of course, a 2-yard piece of something that will go with it and a 3 1/4 yard piece that will go with it. Then it would work great. But if you had to purchase the 5 1/4 yards, to me it's not, oops, sorry about that. To me it's not worth it to use 1 yard and have to buy 5 1/4. So just be judicious as you go through the fabric requirements to use what you're trying to use. And this is no knock against Annie's quilting books. These books are great. They're very reasonably priced. And they have each book has a lot of patterns in them. So if there's one in there that doesn't work for you, that's really okay, because there's probably a whole lot you would make. So that is that. And I missed one thing on the dinosaurs. I said to you, do you want to make a dinosaur? Besides the 2 dinosaur patterns I showed you, the other thing you can do is print out coloring book pages. And you could use like this as a pattern to make an applique dinosaur. Not hard if you like to applique, but still a little harder than just using dinosaur fabric. So sorry I forgot about that. But that is all the answers to the questions that I have today. I would now like to name the winner of last week's Rapture bundle. And it is Peggy Moore, 1947. Please email me your mailing address so I can get that bundle out to you. Email is quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com. And because I had so much Rapture fabric, I'm going to do it again. This is Rapture bundle number 2. So to enter to win this bundle of fabric, please like this video, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And in the comment, write Rapture 2, and you will be entered to win. I know so many of you who make charity quilts, you get a lot of donations of focus fabrics, and you're always looking for blenders. So this would be good for whatever you want to make with them. So is that everything today? I think it is. So that's today's episode. Until next time, happy sewing.